Welcome to Inclusion Starts Now, the podcast. Today, I am interviewing my friend Michael, and we had such a great conversation. I am so excited for you to hear all about this. This week, I'm just going to say that the episode is from Mystic Cat's Tarot Cards. Uh, I highly recommend everyone to get tarot cards and get them like fun. If you're not super invested in learning about all of the amazing stuff behind tarot cards, this is a great way to start because this has been really fun to see like what all the cards mean and then comparing it to like how you interpret it because we've been going through a lot of like interpreting together with me and my guests. And so I've just been like, I've been really loving this as like a great way to learn about tarot cards because I had a deck a while ago and I think I ended up giving it to someone because I was like so intimidated. But this was a great first step to learning tarot card reading, which is just super fun. Um, that is it. So enjoy the episode.
So hi everyone. I'm gonna take that out because that was really awkward. So
Sorry.
today I am talking to my friend Michael, and I met Michael with his mom Lisa at I would say the Tash conferences is where, or Tash or Cal Tash.
I think
I
we
mean,
met at Caltash originally, but I'm not sure.
yeah,
It's been a while.
yeah,
We,
that's probably
we've seen each other in passing quite a bit over the years.
yes. And
That's for
just
sure.
every time I'm obsessed with your duo of you and your mom because you guys are just like such strong advocates, so much knowledge, and I just like love your relationship together. So I'm just like basically a huge fangirl of both of you guys. And this last conference, we had such a good conversation. We were in New Orleans and we went out for dinner, all of us, and I felt like we had such a good conversation. So I obviously, I asked you, I was like, do you want to be on my podcast? Because I feel like this topic is so important and I want everyone to hear it. But before we get into it, uh, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm Michael Carey. You obviously heard about my mom. She's awesome as well. Um, I am, 6 foot tall. I have blonde hair. I don't remember what color my eyes are. Never do. Uh, um, and I have a number of disabilities, and I'm also gay. And that's what we're here to talk about, the intersectionality.
Yes. And what disabilities? I know you're autistic, right?
Yeah, I've got
And
autism, ADHD, anxiety, and dysgraphia, and probably
okay.
one more that I can't think of.
And dysgraphia, is that the like how you're like ex it's something in the brain, right? Am I
Yeah,
wrong?
it's
No,
between the
just I
brain and the
feel like I
hand.
messed this up.
Yeah, it's the way that I can't remember her name, but I met her at Copa, described it to me because I couldn't find a good explanation to understand my own disability.
Yeah.
It was a disconnection between my brain and the way my hand moves and operates, which causes difficulty in writing. And I've recently discovered, but I'm not certain, sign language. Because
Yeah.
I've noticed I'm currently learning sign language for my little brother who has Down syndrome, and I've noticed all sorts of bumps that other people don't have with my signing, and I'm
Oh,
pretty sure that's the dysgraphia.
that's interesting. Can you explain? Because I know sign language, so I kind of want to know like what would you say? Like do you like are you having a hard time like with the fine motor skills of like choosing
It,
where your hand's gonna be?
it's more like planning out where my hand's gonna be. Like I'll know all the words and I can sign them in my head, right? I
Yeah.
don't know the grammar and stuff of sign language yet, but it's like putting together the sign in physicality. Like, if I want to say I want milk, really simple sign, I'll sometimes have trouble with where my fingers are going,
Yeah.
which I also has presented itself with the dysgraphia and with the writing, which is why nobody can read my writing, including
Yeah.
myself.
Oh my gosh, that's really interesting because and I'm pretty sure we talked about dysgraphia, like you didn't get that until later in life, right?
Yes, I had an awesome third grade teacher who, amazing teacher. She pulled my mom aside one day and whispered into my mom's ear, your son's like, "Hi, Lisa, how are you doing? You should get your son tested." Yeah, so this is amazing. Yeah, he probably has something else. So your son's doing great, got to keep it on the
Yeah.
down low. But that teacher changed my life
Yeah.
because it went from, I think I was a straight F student at that time, even with the accommodations for autism and all that, just because I couldn't write, and then I got the accommodations for writing and for math and all that, and everything improved.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I mean, I would be so interested, like, in the numbers of how often children get like late diagnoses to dysgraphia.
Yeah, because it's also like my mom was told for a while, oh, he just needs to practice his writing. I think I did a program called Writing Without Tears or something. I can't remember the exact name.
Yeah. No, I know that
But
one.
yeah, then that's probably right. Where they just had me sit there and write lines over and over and over, and I can tell you it was not without tears.
Yeah.
Uh, and it did not help at all,
Yeah.
you know? And I think in combination with that teacher, my mom tells the story of her realizing that there was something, like seriously needing help. Whenever I
Yeah.
wrote, I think it was in like between second and third grade, and then the teacher was icing on the cake, where I wrote a Christmas list, and my mom calls me in because she couldn't read a couple of the items. She's like, "So what's this? What's this one?" And I remember just not being able to read it, and remembering that is one that I really, really, really wanted, and
Oh,
just sobbing because there was this thing on my Christmas list that I really wanted
yeah.
for Christmas, but had no idea what it was.
Oh my gosh.
So that was fun.
Yeah. Well,
We
that's
we started typing my Christmas list after that.
nice. Well, I feel like that is a really common challenge in classrooms where people are like, this child's just not getting it. We're just going to keep practicing it the same way until they get it. Like that's their way of supporting them instead of
Yeah,
being like, how about
that
we look into like, there might
that's
be like a challenge here. Like, how about we figure it out and then like give a better accommodation instead of just like repetitive motion.
yeah, drill it into their head until they get it right.
Yeah.
It's just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Some people aren't going to get something even if you explain it. Like a lot of people don't get something if you explain it to them the same way over and over and over and over again. You need to, multimodal learning. You need to give it to them in different formats. You need to give it to them in a way that they can handle it. And then if they're still struggling with it, look into the reason behind that because it's not. I have never met someone, and I know that there are some kids out there who are just obstinate to learning and all that. I do get it. But I've never met someone with a disability who's just, I don't want to learn anything ever in this category. You
Yeah.
know? It's more of, well, I can't understand it, so I just give up. Or I'm not being given the supports I need, so why continue trying? You
Yeah.
know? Like, I know someone who struggled with reading. They could not read for the longest time. And then they started, I don't know if you know Roblox.
Yeah.
They started playing Roblox and learned to read because they needed to read the chats
Yeah.
in order to communicate with other people. And that's why they started reading. I
That's
know
so,
they read pretty often.
yeah. I mean,
It's
it's really because I also had a student who, and now that I think about it, I kind of feel like he might have had dysgraphia. But now what's dysplasia? I feel like I'm mixing up. You know what? That doesn't matter. That's not
dysplasia.
the,
Is that the tongue?
I don't know. I there's so much information in my brain. Sometimes I just like can't find it all. But he had a hard time writing, and he he was autistic or he is autistic. I want to say he had another disability and I can't remember, but his family was just like so focused on him writing. And I remember at one point, I mean, I was with him for like oh wait, no, maybe just 1 year. That doesn't matter. By the end of the year, I was like, we have worked on writing his name so much. And like, you can tell what it says, even though it's like not very clean, but it's like, I think we're focusing too much on this because like he's getting bored. Like you can tell he was just like, oh my God, you're gonna make me write my name again. And like,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't, I don't know. I don't think I knew much about like AAC devices or like Go Talks or, like tablets and stuff at that point. I mean, this was 15 years ago. Who knows? Oh my God, that can't be right. I'm gonna ignore that fact. Um, but I ended up making him like a visual board for like reading comprehension. So we would like read a story together, and then he would make the sentences by picking out the words and gluing them on and making a sentence. And he was able to do it. Like he didn't need a lot of support. And I was like trying to keep showing people, I'm like, he's comprehending, he's getting it, but we're like making him do letters. He's like a third grader. And I'm like, why are we still practicing letters in his name? Like he knows it. He just like, there are other ways to write. Like we have technology, like and we could keep writing, but like, why are we spending so much time on it? Like it felt,
Yeah.
yeah.
Karen, you mentioned Karen Cole earlier, and she really revolutionized how I see this whole thing, you know? Um, I don't remember what conference
I
it's
love
at, but
Karen.
we went up the elevator, we stood on a balcony and talked for like 3 hours about this. And she really, because I didn't quite understand, that inclusion and how accommodations can work. But like, why are we still working with a fifth grade student on basic addition when instead, and this was from I think that this was from a case she actually worked, where instead we can teach that student to use a calculator and maybe
Hmm.
instead check his peers' work. Why do we need to have these students focusing on such rudimentary, I say rudimentary, but you know what I mean,
Yeah.
rudimentary work when we can instead elevate the work that they're doing to a level that is much closer to their peers and in a way that they can interact with their peers
Yeah.
and implement ways in which they can do it without having to struggle as much, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's not like we don't all have calculators, you know?
Yeah.
Every
Oh, that's
single person alive has a calculator.
all
Why do we need to
attached to
teach this?
us.
Exactly. Why do we need to teach this student? Why do we need to drill into the student's head that 1 + 1 = 2 when instead we can show them 1 + 1 = 2?
Yeah. I and I feel like this is actually a really great segue into the just like identities and pushing against social norms of like, okay, this is how it was done, but like why? Like why does it have to be done that way? Like how like more detrimental is it going to be for this student that they're now not learning anything past 1 + 1 because we're so focused on them getting that 100% right or 80% right, where it's like, now they're missing all of this other information that like could be really helpful. Where yeah, like a simple calculator can still get them to understand more information. Um, so so in New Orleans, we were talking about why is there such an increasing number of people who share multiple identities of like LGBTQ plus. Um, we talked a little bit about people of color. I don't have that
Yeah.
much information. I know we're two white people talking about it, but if
Yeah.
you have any information, I'd love to hear it. Um, and then the disabled community. And there has been, I mean, and it shows like percentage wise that in the disabled community, there are huge populations of people of color, which is like socio and that's a whole thing. That's probably a whole nother episode. But
Yeah.
and LGBTQ plus. So why do we feel like this coincides so much? And I've looked it up and there's not a lot of information on it. But the only theory that I've even thought of is basically what you said beautifully at dinner. So, what do you think?
Well, I personally hypothesize that it's two things at the same time. There's this one element where a lot of people with disabilities have a lot more to come to terms with. They have to come to understand their disability and how it affects them, which means that like for me personally, I had to look more deeply at how I interact with the world, how I exist in the world. And that kind of opened my horizons to, hey, wait a minute, I don't think I'm straight. And it made me kind of question all these other things, because I really wasn't thinking about my disability and all that stuff because I had bigger things to deal with, such as my abhorrent behavior whenever I was younger. I didn't really think about this stuff. And I think it was whenever I was like 13, 14,
Mhm.
whenever I really started to think about who I was as an individual, how the ADHD, the autism, the dysgraphia, et cetera, all commingled with who I was. And um, that looking at who I was sort of also opened up the horizon of me figuring out who I found attractive, who, you know, because before that it was more me sitting there with the societal standard, okay, I'm supposed to like women, so I had a girlfriend. It was a
Yeah.
weird relationship. It only worked because it was long distance. Okay, I'll tell you that much. But
Are you still friends with her?
yeah, she recently got married. It was awesome. But
Nice.
um, you know, it before that it was more actually I think I had two girlfriends. But sorry, before that it was more me existing in this space where I was supposed to be existing. But once I started looking at these societal norms and who I was and how this all interacted with each other, I came to realize like who I was. And I think that that largely affects a lot of people with disabilities because understanding yourself is necessary whenever you have a disability. You can't just say, "Oh, I exist." And I don't think that necessarily more people with disabilities are LGBTQIA plus. I think that it's the same rate as the rest of society, but I think that it's this forced introspection that
Yeah.
causes a lot of people with disabilities to realize, oh, hey, I don't exactly fit these hetero or cis normative things, so maybe I should go find the right title for myself, go figure out who I am.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. I do think it's it's just pushed people to think more outside the box of like what society basically tells us to do, or you know, yeah, well, just tells us what to do. Um,
Yeah.
because and I recently posted this video of like I asked parents with children with disabilities, and I'm like, what are things that you wish people would stop saying to you? And a lot of it was, pity and like, I'm so sorry, like, you're so strong, like maybe you can have another kid. Like it was a lot of ableist comments of that, like, because this child has a disability, they're not like at equal footing as people without disabilities. And and I thought it goes with like the LGBTQ plus community because yeah, like what you're saying is, I mean, I have two small children and I've already had people be like, "Oh, it's like they're going on a date." Like they would never, like my little
Y-
girl, they will talk about like, "Oh, maybe they have a crush," or like, and it has definitely gone down, I think, since from when I was a kid. But there are some people who still say things that I'm just like, dude, she's four. And I'll say a lot of times where I'm like, like, or they can date their other girlfriend. Like I'll make the comment of like, or maybe she'll date no one. Maybe she doesn't want to date like, or maybe she won't be a she. Like, and we're very open to like we try really hard in our house to like switch she, he, and they with like toys and with people. And we really just try to normalize that it's like, you have like your own identity and we're not going to push like the societal norm identity on you. Even though the rest of society is going to continue to do so. Like it's really hard.
Yeah,
It's really hard to
absolutely.
not do it.
Yeah, that comes to my second point of why I think that the intersectionality is bigger because it is because I think that a lot of non-disabled individuals, people without these disabilities, look at societal norms and adopt them a lot quicker than people with disabilities. It's
Yeah.
don't put your elbows at the table, on the table. That might take someone with autism or who has a learning disability forever to learn that completely or completely understand why that's the case. Because I never understood that. Why do we need to keep our elbows off the
Yeah.
table? It's more comfortable and easier to eat, you know?
Yeah.
Um, they just people without disabilities oftentimes just are able to more quickly accept that this is how we do it and this is how it should be, which means they're able to look around at the world and see that, oh, okay, I've got a mom and a dad, so obviously I need to fit into one of these categories for gender. Or they're in a straight relationship, so there's not really a way for me to do it otherwise. So people who might be, on the bi spectrum, but or maybe gender fluid, or in areas that aren't exactly black and white, are a lot more ready to accept that, oh, I can just, get rid of this part, get rid of this section,
Yeah.
rather than look in the mirror and see where they are on that spectrum, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's both of those points are just like really spot on of like, I mean, yeah, it makes so much sense that when you're like constantly having to fight for, I mean, like disability wise, like if you're constantly having to say like, yes, I'm autistic, I'm also like capable of being in my community. Like I'm also like just because I'm autistic doesn't mean that like I'm not smart or happy or funny or like I can't have a relationship. And so it's like when you're like already like having to defend one of your identities, I feel like it does make you reflect more on like, okay, well, society, the societal norms, like those are wrong. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
go like explore all these other ones. And I wish more people did because or like oh, so I know I sent this to you and I was actually re-listening to it right before we got on. But it's the podcast with Adam Grant and Glennon Doyle. They're both well, I think Glennon Doyle's a writer. I think that's but she doesn't like identity. She's very into like when you have this identity, then you have to like fit into that box or else you could fail. So she like at one point, she was Christian and went to church, but then people in her church weren't really inclusive of like her other identities. And she was like, okay, so like I failed that one. And then she's like, okay, well now I'm a wife. And then she's like, my husband was cheating on me. And then I realized I like women. So I failed as a wife and I failed as like a straight person. And so her
Yeah.
whole like she doesn't even like to have identities because then there's like room to fail your identity. And then if you have an identity, you have a group of people you agree with, but then that means you have a group of people who disagree with you.
I did see that, and I both agree and disagree. I
Yeah.
think that identities do complicate things, and they do try and fit you into a category, but identities also validate who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Being able to go into a community and see that there are people like me who exist validates my existence. It tells me that, oh, okay, I'm okay with that. And I think that that also, um, I've set up a lot of safe spaces online for friends in other states and places where it's not exactly safe to be disabled or queer.
Yeah.
Um, and I recently had someone outside of one of those communities reach out to me and was like, so do I have to come out to my parents? How do I do this? I know that you're open and I'm sorry for asking you this, but how does this work? And I explained to them that no, you don't have to come out to everyone. And I also explained to them that this identity that you're trying to figure out, because they weren't exactly sure where they were. They just knew that they
Yeah.
weren't straight, right? Because they were also confused because their identity kept changing and where they felt they fit kept changing. But the way that I say it is who you are doesn't change. The label that you put on it does as you understand it more.
Yeah.
You know,
I like that.
like I am gay, but I had all sorts of different labels for myself as I was exploring who I was, as I was understanding how I function within this world. And all of those labels, all those different steps gave me points in communities where I can be like, okay, this exists. This is valid. I'm not batshit
Yeah.
for thinking that this is a thing, you know? And I do agree that the labels do force you into a category. There's a really fascinating study done by I can't remember who, where they gave like it doesn't just force you into label in categories, it puts categories on you from others. There was a really fascinating study done by I can't remember who, and they told teachers like, so this student has autism, this student has ADHD, and this student has XYZ. They were just completely making it up, you
Yeah.
know? And then they sent the students in there for a week. And whenever it came out, the students with autism, the students with ADHD, those students had something like 3 times more disciplinary actions against them than all other students,
Yeah.
which is an insane amount. These students were just randomly sampled and put in there. It's just random
Yeah.
students given these labels that then put them into a category by someone else.
I've
So,
heard of a lot of these studies where so I recently heard of one where they had teachers observing students like at a desk, either doing like an art project or something like writing. And then the students were like different cultures, like different races. Um, and all of the teachers, like white or black, or I'm pretty sure it was just white or black teachers. While watching the students, they targeted their eye gaze, and all of the teachers kept checking in on the black students more than any other student. And
Yeah.
and there were like no behaviors happening. They were just like communicating, but it was like just like that internal bias, like biased opinion, like that internalized ableism that people
The
don't
subconscious
always,
biases.
yeah, like they don't know that they have, like how it can kind of come out when we least expect it. And
Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's I saw another one that was like that where they had like it's not just at this base level. They had educator or not educators, sorry, interviewers from all over the country, all sorts of different corporations, all sorts of different things. And they gave them these resumes, that had different aims. Like some of them had Jamal, some had Natasha, some had
yeah,
Michael, some had Emily, and they found that the more ethnic a name or a place you grew up in, the more likely your resume is just to get tossed in the trash right off the bat.
I
I
actually
think that
think I
it
saw
ended up,
this article or this
yeah,
study.
I might be completely wrong on this number, but I think that it was Jamal had something like a 60% chance to just get tossed off the table right away, while Emily had a 15% chance,
Yeah,
which is this insane gap between, your resume isn't even getting considered because your name's Jamal.
yeah,
Identical resumes in every other way, you know? It's
yeah,
And I'm curious how that would affect, like, we have schools for the blind, schools for autistic individuals, like, and all sorts of these other areas. And then also, I work with nonprofits that, if you look them up, they're going to be disability related. And they also found that if these people worked with nonprofits that were related to race, they were likely to get tossed out. So how does that affect people with, how does that affect disability as well? Is there an intersectionality there? That really made me curious, but I couldn't find anything on that.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like it is such a broad, like it's hard to get actual information on these things because I mean, like what you were saying, how identities are so um like there's a spectrum. So it's like, you might agree that you like are queer, but then it's like, where are you in that community? And especially because, and I liked what you said before, where you're like, it's not like the number is higher in the disabled community. It's just that they're more accepting to admit another identity or like to
They're able
accept.
to reflect more on it, or they have to reflect more on it, or,
Yeah. And so I
there's
feel
more
like
thought.
I feel like with, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought too. Whatever I was just saying, being able to like accept, oh, I'm sorry, now I remember. It's like harder to get those studies done because it's like, like how much can you classify something? Because like when you classify those people, like you are kind of like labeling their identity to be like, okay, well, we have 100 people who have a disability and are LGBTQ plus. And then it's like, okay, well, what kind of disabilities do they have? Where are they on the spectrum? Where do they identify in LGBTQ plus? Like, how do we like try to get a general idea of like trying to find a scientific answer other than I think you're right. It's that once you are like outside of societal norms that you're like more willing to be like, you know what? No, this is who I am and I'm gonna be happy. So like middle finger to you all.
Yeah.
Um, 'Cause yeah, I mean, I know I grew up in Orange County and yeah, it like I probably knew like a couple of friends of mine that were gay. And I mean, sadly, one of them has unalived themselves since high school. The other one has kind of fallen off the face of the earth and is in QAnon. That's a whole other thing. Um, but there's just like they grew up in an area that was very conservative at the time. And even though now it's becoming more like liberal and LGBTQ plus friendly, there there's like you could you could see like what was happening to people's mental health when they weren't being accepted for like who they were. And I feel like that's
Yeah.
still a huge problem with the disability community. And I mean, I know personally, my youngest, we just started speech therapy for him, and we're about to transfer. We're trying to figure out if we're going to do switch over to an IEP because he's almost of age to get that. And so we're going to do an assessment and everything. But for me, working in the field for so long, I'm fine with the like, the identity, and I'm fine with like getting obviously early intervention to help him communicate is so important. But on the other end, I'm like, I don't want to be in IEP meetings for like,
Yeah.
like, I don't these people are going to hate me because I am going to be like such an annoying advocate. If anything, if we do end up getting an IEP, I'm not sure yet. I'm probably going to just have to contact your mom and be like, can you pump me up? Can you send me like a voice recording to pump me up for every IEP meeting?
Yeah, yeah, one of the things that my mom does is she never advocates for us herself because
Ooh,
you can't see the forest through the trees, you know? Like for her personally, when in our conversations about this exact topic is she'll focus on one problem and not being able to see everything else that's wrong, where she as an advocate can sit down and look at everything that's going on a piece of paper, and the mom might be, well, he's behind in speech. That's super important. But he's also not doing well in writing. So what if he has dysgraphia? We should probe for some more testing.
yeah,
Or, it's this thing where like recently we brought in Karen Cole to Chime
yeah,
to do an IEP meeting because well my parents did, and I completely agreed because I felt the same way. Because we weren't giving Patrick, my youngest brother, the level of presumed competence he deserved. We were saying, oh, he can't do these things, so he needs to learn longer. And that was
yeah,
setting him behind his peers in a way that I didn't feel was acceptable. And then they came to not feel as acceptable. And Karen came in and just said, well, no, he should be with his peers. He needs to be at this level. So let's change things up, you
yeah.
know? And go,
I
Karen.
love that. I love that your mom was able to see her own like barriers to helping you guys. I thought you were going to say that she stepped back because she was like, no, I want you guys to advocate. Like, I'm going to help you become these like, which I do feel like you guys are very strong, like self-advocates from my outside opinion.
I'm I'm really not. I struggle. I can advocate for other people, no problem. I'm really good
Yeah,
at that. But self-advocacy is something that I struggle with for a number of reasons. And, I've been working on it and I'm getting better, but it's the self-advocacy skills that I did build were largely due to, my mom bringing me into the IEP meetings and having me sit down and explain what I wanted,
yeah,
explain what I was experiencing. And I think that that's something that needs to be done more often, bring the kid in.
yeah. Oh, I
Because the
totally
kids should
agree.
have a voice in their own IEP meeting. And I know it's a lot more, it's done a lot more now. But I still hear cases where the kid isn't even talked to about the thing, you know?
Oh, that I would say that's more common
Is it?
than I think it's more common for kids not to be in their
Yeah, I know.
IEPs or
It's
like even have
definitely,
an
but it's better
opinion.
than it was, but it's still,
Yeah,
the kids, give us a seat at the table and we'll tell you what's wrong. I can tell you even in third, second grade, I could tell you exactly what was going wrong.
yeah,
I knew all the problems I was having. I knew the areas that were causing me sensory overload or to have meltdowns.
yeah.
Give me a little while to talk and I'll tell you all the problems.
And I think
So
it's just more beneficial for the team to like stay positive. Like,
just stay
'cause
focused on the child too.
yeah, because sometimes it felt like we'd get to the IEP meetings and it was like you're like everyone's talking about the person who's not in the room. Like it felt kind of I don't know, sneaky or something that like, it's like, well, he's not doing very well here and he's really struggling here. This behavior is really bad. And it's like, if we had them in the room, then we can like actually have an IEP that's focused on them instead of like, like what they want to learn and how they, how to succeed and how to advocate for themselves
I
instead of like, here, let's talk about all the things they're doing bad and the IEP goals that weren't met. And I feel like it forces it to be more positive, which,
Yeah, but I also think that there needs to be time without the student. to give you time
For all
in
the
the
boring
IEP
stuff.
meeting for all the boring stuff and to talk about the negatives, which maybe the student shouldn't hear all of. Because I know if
Mhm.
I've gone back and looked at some of my IEPs, and I know that if I was in the whole IEP, I would have been devastated because I thought I was doing so much better than I really was. Uh,
Yeah, but what if they like said it in a constructive way?
well,
I guess it makes me just try to think about I would need like I would need to like be in the IEP meeting, see the example.
yeah, no, I feel like it would depend, but I feel like a lot more kids can find the bullshit, if you excuse my language,
Yeah,
than you give it
that's
credit for.
okay.
You can hear the negatives in a constructive way, and I know a lot of kids can definitely figure out, oh, that was not nice, or
Yeah.
that wasn't exactly a positive thing to say about me, or
Yeah.
which isn't exactly a beneficial thing for the kid, you
Yeah,
know?
that's true. I
But I
guess I
definitely
would
think it would
I
also depend on child to child because I know that some people do
yes.
definitely do better whenever they're told these are the areas you're struggling in and these are the areas that you need help in, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, I guess I'd be interested in like I it's just I guess like reflecting on my own schooling is always it's just like an interesting thing to do because I'm where where did like I don't feel like I really loved learning until I got to like college. And I did learn things throughout school. If I liked the topics, I did better or the subjects. But like I know if I didn't do well with a teacher, I would usually just like switch to a different teacher's class that was easier. Like I
Yeah.
um so it like I don't know how I would have felt if someone tried to actually talk to me of yeah, get it because like I really did not like tests, especially like history. It was really hard for me to learn all of these historical facts. And I still struggle with this, and I think it's because I can't put it in my head that some things have happened at the same time. That like people could have been so racist and like horrible to people, and then like be able to do life-saving surgeries. Like that doesn't make sense that those two things were happening at the same time in our life.
Yeah. No, I
And I
struggled a lot.
yeah, what were you gonna say?
No, you continue.
Oh, I mean that was just like an area that I struggled with, and I don't think I just don't think anyone really knew how to like make learning more fun to me than like what of just like, it's just something you do, like, learn
Yeah,
stuff,
no.
go to the next thing. And I've being now a teacher and a parent, I'm like, no, we're gonna make learning fun. Like you're learning about a topic, we're gonna go find a museum near us who like is gonna talk about it. Like we're gonna put it into our lives so we can see why this history is so important. Because yeah, it wasn't until I started traveling that I was like, oh, like I went to um
Okay.
I went to Auschwitz and I'm Jewish. I think I'm like 50% Jewish. Um and I mean obviously I've learned about the Holocaust, but it wasn't until like I went to Auschwitz and like being I mean not like I can just like pick up and be like, "Hey family, let's all go here and have this learning experience." But I wish there was like a better way to like learn about these things that made it more like I don't know, attached
Have
to
you
me.
So
It was really
one of the
sad.
things that really cemented that stuff for me is there's these things that are being made called VR experiences on the VR
Ooh.
headsets where like there's one that I did where I toured Anne Frank's house.
Oh,
And there was
that's
another
cool.
where I there were, you sit down in this restaurant and you're in the VR so you can look around. It feels a lot more like you're there. And I
Yeah.
listened to the firsthand experiences of people who oh my God, what were those protest called? All African Americans got on the buses and went down to racist southern places, the sit-ins.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
you know, the sit-ins, and I listened to these firsthand experiences from these African Americans who went down and participated in these sit-ins in one of the
Wow.
restaurants where they did the sit-in. And I felt like that was a lot more impactful on my understanding of this cultural event than me sitting down and hearing about it from a teacher who's you know, not even been
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's revolutionary. Like my little brother, Patrick, the younger one, he's obsessed with the human body. So I found him this. VR thing where you can travel through the human body and through the
Oh
capillaries and all
my
the blood
gosh.
cells and learn all about the proteins. And he watched it like 40 times on my headset.
It's like the updated Magic School Bus.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how that one feels. I don't think the
Yeah.
Magic School Bus does too advanced of lessons, but human body, I feel like I've seen that.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, but I feel like that can definitely be very impactful, like you were
Yeah.
saying, on students who are trying to learn things and just don't quite comprehend
Yeah.
them because sitting down and being able to see how everything connects in first person is amazing.
Yeah. Oh
And
my
it
gosh.
definitely helped me on my biology exam.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. It's hard to just like keep reading facts all day and then trying to memorize them and then perform them. That's like a really
Yeah, I
exhausting.
have a
Yeah.
much easier time with that than most. I think it's because I focused on that rather than essays for the longest time.
Yeah.
Because, well, more short stories and stuff at that age, but, because I couldn't write
Yeah.
and it was very insistent upon me rewriting stuff until I learned it. So that wasn't, I still struggle with essays and I think that that's part of it.
Yeah.
But um, I definitely think it's a lot more fun and a lot more multimodal than just sitting there and reading facts or
Yeah.
watching a video on this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know like the public school system pretty much started because they wanted to just train kids to be like assembly line workers. I don't have like the resources to back that up, but that is I am assuming a pretty known fact because I have talked to a lot of people about this and I know that there are books about it, but it just talks about how like kids were like put into this classroom to like learn these basic things to then like work in these assembly lines or these factories and just like, kind of do as they're told and like have these basic skills. Um, but now it's like our world, obviously it's very different. Like that's not a
We're
common
moving past
anymore.
it.
And so then it's like, so now that the outcome for after school is different, how are we going to fix what's happening in school? Because like, and don't get me wrong, I think a lot of what we learn is important. I think it is really important to learn about a lot of the history and like science. Like, I think there's so much that happens in school that is really good learning, but there's so much that gets missed that it
Yeah.
needs to like be reevaluated. But change is hard.
Yeah,
Um,
and then it's also a revaluation like that costs a lot and,
yeah,
you know, certain people are trying to reduce the costs
I
in
know.
ways that are not sustainable. So it
Yeah.
becomes this whole question of can we? I was talking to a friend while playing a game. We were in a public lobby, so there was a lot of people around, and someone overheard that I was talking about the fires, and they heard on Fox News that LA burned down. So they assumed all 4,000 square miles of LA were gone. You know? They just assumed
Yeah.
that that's what happened. LA didn't exist anymore. So it was very interesting sitting them down and explaining to them, no, we only about 60 square miles burned down total. We're fine. It's
Yeah.
it's sad, it's tragic. We're gonna have to recover, but LA still exists.
How many videos I've seen of people being like, "Hi, I live in LA. I'm nowhere near the fires. Let me explain." And they're like, "You can see the smoke coming from the end." Like it's so much
Yeah.
education. There's like so much opportunity for people to learn, yet we don't take it. I don't know how to get I just like really want people to like learning. And I'm still figuring out how to I've read a lot of book about cults, a lot of books about cults, and I'm like, how can I make inclusion a cult that will like get everybody invested?
I feel like the reason that so many people don't love learning is not necessarily they don't love learning, it's just that they don't know how to verify the facts. They turn on Fox News or some other news site and say, oh, hey, here's a source of information, and then they take everything to heart. I still
Yeah.
fact even stuff from like AP News and Reuters, which are, seen as some of the most centered and factual news reporting agencies. I still check them with each other or different places. I still double and
Yeah.
triple check everything I learn to make sure that it's real. And I feel like a large part of this seemingly hatred for learning is more a misunderstanding of how to verify facts.
Yeah. I yeah, because I mean, and it's so hard because like there are facts, and then there's like people's opinions on those facts, and then how just things get so skewed with like language and biases and just all of that is like such a mess. Um,
And then the intentional
yeah.
disinformation, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's people who make mistakes and honest mistakes are just misinformation. And that's, that's a problem, but it's fine in my opinion because it's not an intentional obstruction of the truth. Like some of the disinformation we see, like a well-known news host saying that LA is gone. That's
Yeah.
just wrong. You can take 2 seconds and verify that that's not true. So why are you using your platform to say this?
Yeah. I mean I don't watch any news. I get news in different ways, but I mean I don't like we don't watch the news on TV or anything because it feels like a lot of like scary headlines, the same horrible footage over and over again, and I'm just
Yeah,
like that's not good for my mental health. Like I will
I
find news and I will like,
I stick to reading articles on AP
yeah,
News and Routers, like I said. And then I verify and triple check because somebody might have made a mistake. It
yep,
happens.
which they do. We're human.
We're all human.
Okay. We've totally gone off topic, and this
We
usually is
have,
what happens. This is a very normal occurrence for my life. Um, but I wanted to ask about your coming out story. We said we were going to talk about it, and you distracted me with so
hey,
many
no,
other
that
things
was
I
all
want to talk
you.
about. You're right.
Um,
It was me.
so coming out was really weird because I sort of just like slid into the identity rather than directly coming out at first. Because for me, I was still figuring it out, right? Like I said earlier, it's your identity is what it is, but it's going to take you time and different labels to try it out. Like I tried bisexual and all sorts of other different labels between bi and gay until I reached the conclusion that, oh yeah, I'm gay, right?
Yeah.
And it felt like the same thing that I was doing with, it happened at the same time I was doing that with my disability, figuring out how exactly the autism affects me was really instrumental to me in figuring out how exactly my sexuality influences me, and figuring out how exactly I see the world, how exactly, who I find attractive, who exists around me, and like how to accommodate myself with my disabilities felt similar enough that I was able to use the logic, in quotations, I used for one on the other to try and figure each other out. And they sort of bounced with each other. And then eventually I've got a couple gay aunts that live in Indiana.
Hmm.
Um, and eventually one day I just was like, oh yeah, I'm bi to them. And then it just kind of opened it up and I started coming out to everyone else. And luckily I live in LA and everyone's super accepting, but that's not always the case.
Yeah.
So,
And what did your parents say?
uh, they just kind of accepted it. Um, they were nice about it and they really made it sure that I felt accepted. So that was nice. But I've got a grandma who I haven't told yet because I've got a feeling. So there are still
Yeah.
like even like she doesn't live in LA anymore, but even though she grew up in LA back in the God knows when, um, there are still people who have these problems. And I feel like LA as a society as a whole still has these issues with LGBTQIA and disability, despite what I use the term performative progressive. I feel like in some ways LA is performative progressive, where they're like, yeah, look at how inclusive we are. And then you look at the actual, like I'm going to use a hyper specific example of jobs, right? Like, oh, hey, look how inclusive we are. We got all these disabled staff members and all these African American staff members, and you look at it, it's like, okay, on the bottom tier you have like, good mix, and then you go up one tier and it's like, oh, you have one white woman and then all white men. And you go up another
Yeah.
tier and it's just white men, and it's just this is performative progressivism whenever you don't actually include this racial and uh, disability and queer, um, you don't fully include these people in your company. You just do it at the most bottom levels, you
Yeah.
know? And it becomes this question of, is this company or is this person or is this place actually accepting of me and who I am? Or is it just that they're saying they're accepting?
Yeah. And okay, so this conversation of like uh companies actually being inclusive or like the idea of inclusivity. Oh my gosh, my head is just going in so many different places. So first, I just read this book called Cultures of Growth, and there's a whole chapter about DEI, um, diversity, equity, inclusion. Is that
Yeah, I think
diversity?
so.
Um, and it goes over like how you actually have to implement that you do have to take active steps of like you're in a meeting and you have to notice like, wow, it's been a lot of white people talking. Let me see how I can talk to this like person of color that I know isn't talking. Let me see how I can make sure they feel like they have like a spot at the table. Like how can like because you do kind of have to like also support that, how they're gonna might they might feel at the table. Like they might feel like the odd one out. How can you give them that support so they don't feel that? Um, and then talking again about like news sources, kind of messing up the word inclusion. Because I know and my mom, I feel like my mom and I have had really good conversations about language, and inclusion is one of them where she's even told me she's like how I describe include or like she's told me that how I describe inclusion sounds great, but that's not how she is hearing about inclusion from all from all the different news sources. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's so interesting that like a word, and I know, I mean, also with the LA fires, how people were blaming, they were calling it like the DEI hire. Um, like that's the problem, and that's why these fires happened. And it's just like so wild to me that this can all just get like so misconstrued. Oh my God, where was I going with that? Did you see how I even said my head is going all over the place and now I lost what we were talking about?
I don't know, but I'm just gonna respond to that
Okay,
because I
great.
feel like with the DEI hire thing, people don't understand. Like, you might have 100 perfectly qualified candidates, 100 that are exactly at the top, and there's like no difference between them, right? So what you do is you say, okay, we just hired 70 white men, right? So let's to fill these next 10 roles, let's look at the minorities in these 100 identical applications and pull those out. And if they're actually qualified, let's hire them,
Yeah,
you know, instead in order to balance this out so that we're not just giving jobs to this one group of people. And it's not DEI hires aren't just like taking jobs away. They're just equalizing the jobs between races so that instead of Jamal, like we talked about earlier, just getting tossed off the stack,
yeah,
Jamal now actually gets a seat at the table.
yeah. And I feel like that's been a really hard, and I would say even me personally, I have I have had to be corrected because I had a brother-in-law who he was going for this professor role, um and it was like for racism, like racism in society. Like I think that was the class. It was something about like race and culture, which he talks a lot about. He's like a history teacher, call it whatever. He teaches history, he teaches race, he teaches all that. um and it was between him and another guy, and the other guy got it, and the other guy was black. And I remember asking him like, "Oh, do you feel like he got it because he was black?" And he was like, he's like, "No, I just think he was the better candidate." Or like, however, his response was like, I was like, "What a stupid thing that I just said." Like that my original like thinking was like, "Oh, well, we're trying to make things equal. Do you feel like you didn't get the job because of that?" And he was like he was, and it wasn't
Yeah,
like he was threatened at all. He was like, no, he was just as like he was
there-
qualified. He got the job.
yeah, if you're equally qualified as someone, and why shouldn't they be hired instead of you? Like we're trying to even the DEI initiatives, which a lot of companies have rolled back on recently. I'm just going to point that out. A lot of
Yeah.
companies have stopped doing that, which is sad. But these DEI initiatives are in order to equalize the playing field, not turn it against you, but to change things so that generational and socioeconomic wealth between ethnicity,
Ethnicity.
ethnicities and races can be more equalized going forward, which I feel like is very important. You
Yeah,
know, it's we've historically abused this generational wealth between people. Like a lot of African Americans couldn't get homes in a lot of areas until the Equal Housing Act, and I think it was the 70s or the 60s. I can't remember which. Which is insanely recently.
yeah,
They did not have this generational wealth until their parents got this opportunity. You know, I mean, I've got generational wealth going back forever.
yeah.
I'm lucky. But where was I going with this? Um, but it feels like a lot of the times they don't look at the actual intentions of these initiatives,
Yeah,
people who are completely against them, and instead just say, oh, they're just giving the jobs to underqualified people. When no, these people have done the same amount of work to get this
yes,
job. It's just historically, Jamal's application is going to get tossed out. So why shouldn't Jamal get have better chance at getting the job now? Why shouldn't
yeah.
Jamal get a seat at the table whenever historically he's been tossed out? When if we didn't have these initiatives, studies show he is more likely to get tossed out.
Um, I talk about Adam Grant a lot, and he's the podcast that I sent you. I love his brain so much. He just wrote a book called his last book he wrote was called Hidden Potential, and it's a lot about this, um like how can companies rethink their hiring process because, how many good people are being thrown out because of things that they just didn't have control over. And and then how is that where they came from where they are now, how is that not like a bigger portion of like an application? Because you can't always see that in applications. You're just seeing the now and you're not seeing this, okay, so maybe this person, had some sort of privilege and was able to go to a better college or something, but viewing their whole story, it's like, well, that's not really impressive because they were always on that track. But this person who also got to Harvard, even though his high school GPA sucked, it was because he was working full time to help his family who was sick and blah, blah, look at this story and look at how much harder he had to work, even though they're still at the same place now. How do you figure out this whole story? And then it was this whole thing. It was a
Yeah, yeah,
fascinating.
yeah. No, I
It was
definitely
really
get it because
cool.
it's like definitely because that person with the lower GPA going into it, they definitely had a lower socioeconomic status, which means they're going to have much less privilege, and they're going to even if they're more qualified than the person sitting next to them. And that's part of what TA does. If you have, like, I'm going to go back to Jamal
Yeah.
because I
Our
can't think
buddy
of,
Jamal.
yeah, our buddy Jamal, even if Jamal's more qualified than this other applicant, as it sits, if there's no DEI initiatives, the other applicant is going to get tossed out 15% of the time. Jamal's going to tossed out 60% of the time.
Yeah.
That's an insane difference.
Yeah.
Okay. He's more qualified and he's getting tossed out. So how is a DEI initiative that gives Jamal his fair chance, his fair shot at getting
Yeah.
this job, not a good thing?
And wouldn't companies run so much better if there were so many different perspectives coming into it?
That's
Why would
absolutely a
you
huge.
want 20 of the
Hold on.
same people?
I've got a shirt on that says everyone. I can't read it. Hold on.
Okay. What does it
Sorry.
say?
It says everyone deserves a seat at the table, and we deserve a table that seats everyone.
Ooh, that's cute. I like that.
Yeah, I love it. I got it from Club 21. It's awesome. Um,
Nice.
but I feel like that's
One.
such a strong point because if the table doesn't seat everyone, if your company isn't built for everyone, how are you going to serve everyone? How are you going to get, like, we live
Yeah.
in a capitalist society. If your table is built for white
Yes.
middle class people, you just lost a huge chunk of the market. You bring in these people and you build the table for all of them and you seat everyone at that table, and you're going to have all these different people with all these different perspectives who are going to be able to say, well, if we just, I'm going to do something completely fictitious. If we just tweak the color a little bit,
Yeah.
I feel like African Americans might buy it more, or Hispanic Americans, or all these different groups. or we add this little bit so that people with disabilities can use it. Okay, that costs
Yeah.
them 10 cents in production and expands it to a whole nother market. You
Yeah.
know, the more people we can get at the table, the more ways in which we can market a product.
Yeah. I totally agree. I love this so much. I actually feel like you need to look into Cassidy too. I feel like she lives in LA, I'm pretty sure. And she's amazing. She's really into politics and very like focused on teaching disabled people about politics and about voting and about how to make it accessible. She's amazing. I'm gonna just like send you her info and stuff after this. But we have talked for a really long time. And so we are at the end of our episode because I know I mean, at dinner, I'm pretty sure we talked for like hours and ignored the
We
rest
did,
of our
and on the
group.
walk back.
I know that we were like, no one else talked to us. It's just us two.
Yeah, we got off topic so many times there.
We did because that's just who we are. Um,
Yeah.
I end every episode with a Mystic Cats tarot card reading.
Ooh.
You just get one card. I know very little about tarot cards, so I have a book that I read the answer from, and then we get to interpret it together.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so you could ask a question or in like a kind of general question of like, how is my year gonna go or whatever, or just not ask a question and then we'll just interpret the card that way.
Am I going to get straight A's next semester? Let's be hyper specific.
Ooh. Okay, okay. I felt really good about this card, but I could keep shuffling. I just, you know what? I'm just gonna do,
Hold on, let me change the question. Sorry.
okay.
All right, am I going to get good grades next semester?
I can tell you yes. And that's not without tarot cards, but that's just a personal
Well,
opinion.
let's get an answer from the tarot cards.
Let's see. Oh, look
Oh,
at that. It's a little kitty. So this is the sun, and it's a cat trying to touch the sun. That feels pretty positive to me.
I like that one.
Dude, I was right. I just want to throw that out there. I'm not editing any of that out. I was right. So it says joy and success. This gal has found the coveted sunny spot. She is happy to lay in the warmth of the light. You have everything you need and can be optimistic for the future. This bright and sunny energy is yours to carry onward.
Yay!
That's straight A's so if you could actually just check back with me once your semester is done and confirm that I was
I'll
right.
let you know how it goes. I'll let you know how it goes.
Like I love your want to understand things, and I just feel like just from how I've met you at conferences, you are like you're not just going to be okay. I feel like this is actually why I love the disabled community so much. Just like in like this general of like, if it's filled with disabled and non-disabled people and just like the range of identities is that because it's not a group that just like falls into societal norms, they like question things and they want to understand things and they're okay being like, I don't understand that. Can you describe that to me again?
Yeah.
Which I am not good at. And I have to like people will be talking and they'll say a word I don't know or like a place or something. And then they'll keep going, and I'll just like kind of ignore it of like, oh, okay, well, it's probably just a place. And then all of a sudden, a minute later, I'm like, hey, what was that word? Like, I
Yeah.
know that word.
I
And yeah, that's been really hard for me to like redo in my
yeah,
thinking.
I think that especially with that word example, have you heard of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis?
No, but I
Okay.
love
So
hypotheses.
it absolutely fascinates me. And it talks about how if we do not have a word in our vocabulary, we do not understand that concept. Right. And
Yeah,
it uses colors in different languages as an example. Right. Like Russia has like 20 different words for blue. I'm probably exaggerating here. So they see all of these different blues where English speakers, we've got blue, light blue, and dark blue. We've got
yeah,
other more specific ones, but we don't really use those much. So we see three shades of blue at the most you
yeah.
know? And this differentiation between the languages means that this other culture understands the world in a different way than we do because of the
Ooh,
words that they understand and the language they speak, which is why I feel it's so important, especially with words. If you don't understand a word, to figure out what it means because it might change how you see things,
yeah.
you know?
Oh, I love
Like,
that so much.
yeah, like I one of my favorite words is over Morrow now. because I plan a lot of stuff 2 days ahead.
I
The day
don't
after tomorrow.
I don't know
Overmorrow is
what
the
that
day
means.
after tomorrow,
Ooh,
right?
yeah,
So it's like added a word to my vocabulary that I use often that lets me see this concept in a way that I didn't understand before.
yeah.
You
Oh,
know?
that's so cool.
Another one that I learned about from a Spanish friend was there's a specific word in Spanish language for the time that you talk after dinner.
Yeah,
So I don't know if that's a thing that's common with all Spanish speaking households, but it's really changed how I view eating with the family because now I see the time that we spend after dinner as time to talk. It's this designated time in my mind since I learned about this word, where
yeah.
before I didn't even think about it, you know?
Yeah.
And
My
I
best
feel like,
example is I remember someone explaining love, like the word love. So like in America or in English, we're like we just say I love you to a lot of things, even if we're like in love with our partner. It's like it's all the same word, like same words put together. Um, where like even in American Sign Language, like there's like if you love something, like if you love coffee, it's the sign is like a closed fist and you like kiss your fist. Um, and then like if you like love somebody, you like do, the two fists crisscross over your chest. But then there's like all these different words of like sweetheart. This is like, oh, you're my sweetie, my boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. It's like two
yeah,
thumbs ups together and your thumbs are going up and down. But there's just like all of these different words and explanations of like, and falling in love is a different sign. Like there are different words where like in English we just say love and it's like
yeah.
this like
There,
blanket
there's
statement.
actually an element of this that I've been thinking about whenever it comes to AAC users,
Ooh, yeah.
because for younger AAC users, we designate what words they can use, right?
Yeah.
At some point they become old enough where they can understand the words that they're using and, add more on their own and whatnot. But at younger ages, we might use 400 words around them, and that's definitely a wrong number, but
Thousands, but yes.
yeah, thousands. And then this AAC user gets 50. So
Yeah.
does this 50 words that they can use shape how they view the world? Does do they have I'm curious if these
I
AAC
love that.
users think about the world in these 50 words rather than the thousands of words that they could potentially apply.
I love that so much. Oh my gosh, I love language. Okay,
Yeah,
we're never gonna stop. This is like
no.
I would love to dive more into language and AAC. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
My
no,
brain just
it's
like exploded.
fascinating.
I
Um,
love that. Thank you, Michael, so much for being on my podcast. I appreciate it so much. My brain can't even like compute right now because it's
yeah,
just
it was my pleasure. It was great talking to you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to Inclusion Starts Now, the podcast. If you have any topics that you'd like to hear on the show, please let me know. Go to inclusionstartsnow.com or at Inclusion Starts Now on like any social media thing and talk to me. Tell me what you want to hear. And yeah, okay, that's it. Inclusion starts with you, and I just want to help. Have a great day. Bye.